James Coulter bears the same tattoo as UN leader Roosh.
Chinese characters, and it says honor, loyalty, and respect. Those are virtues that I've sort of always liked and always followed. It later became as a sort of motto for the gang.
No longer just a loose group of friends who deal some drugs, they'd begun branding themselves, organizing, as in organized crime.
And then from there, there's a leap that sort of takes place in t-shirts, hoodies, I'll say very Hells Angels-ish, in the sense that something written on their backs, something that self-identifies them in public.
So we decided to get these rings, and they were 2 gold rings, and if you take them apart, you're relaxed, and if you have them together, that means you're serious. Then the rings were engraved, United Nations, and that was sort of the way to tell us apart. And I'm pretty sure I was one of the first people to get those rings.
It's easy to see why James Coulter was drawn to young Clay Roosh and gang life. Coulter spent his childhood in foster care and grew up craving a sense of belonging.
They just, they accepted me as a family.
James was a young man in search of family and leadership. Clay Roosh provided both.
He taught me a lot. He helped me out a lot. He had a lot of love for me. I got a lot of love for him. He brought me under his wing. He's like my brother, right? We've lost a lot of friends together, and we've fought lots of battles right neck and neck, side by side each other, and yeah, there's things like that you never forget, right?
That's Clay Roosh waving the incense sticks over the grave of a fallen UN gangster. A middle-class valley boy, Roosh created his own brand of Eastern mysticism and used it to bind his gang together. Before it shattered, Roosh's UN gang had grown to about 100 members, many of them buddies from the valley. If Vancouver is a great location for drug trafficking, Abbotsford in the Fraser Valley is just that much better. Less than a 10-minute drive from the heart of Abbotsford, Zero Avenue runs for miles along the border. The cars going the other way are in the U.S.
There's raspberry fields on both sides of the border here, and you'd literally get people who would come up on the south side and then run across into the raspberry fields on the north side. So there's ATVs, there's helicopters, there's fixed-wing airplanes, I'm sure there's hang gliders, there's boats, canoes, belly boats, animals. The compartments we're seeing in both trucks and in vehicles are more sophisticated now than they ever have been.
It's pretty much impossible to stop the flow of drugs by truck, train, plane, and backpack. But that wasn't what really worried people or police. It was the increasing level of violence, especially shocking in a community previously best known for having a world record number of churches. For 2 years in a row, bucolic Abbotsford would earn the dubious distinction of murder capital of Canada. Even teenagers were targeted, kids only marginally involved in the drug trade. Abbotsford's greedy young gangsters sent messages to their competitors in blood.
When you grow your market and it grows into your neighbor's market, depending on your neighbor, it's not going to be well received. And of course, if you're ripping off dope, then there's people protecting the dope grows, then there's violence.
The UN gang was gobbling up turf, building international connections. Their fiercest competitor, and probably the most violent of these middle-class gangs, the Red Scorpions. Centered around BC wrestling champion Jamie Bacon, and including his 2 brothers, Jared and Jonathan. The Red Scorpions gained a reputation for aggressive takeovers of grow-ops and dial-a-dope operations.
The last couple of years of my career, I was solely focused with my partner on investigating every aspect of the Bacon family as resolved around crime in Abbotsford. I became sort of the Bacon guy.
Fuck you, you fucking... Put that thing out of my face, man.
We were aware of them for years, that they were kind of, troublemakers in the community. Initially they were fighting at parties and all that kind of stuff, but eventually when the drug business really got going, and we're talking about guns and shooting people, shooting at people, extreme violence.
The Bacons lived with their parents in a fairly high-end suburban neighborhood. They were anything but marginalized youth. Dad taught special needs kids. Mom worked for a credit union. Yet somehow they raised 3 boys who would become the infamous Bacon brothers. Gang trouble brewing in the Fraser Valley erupted in September 2006 when Jonathan Bacon was gunned down in the driveway of the family home. He barely survived, and Lyle Simpson was shocked by the reaction of Bacon's father.
He was laughing, which I thought was highly weird because his son, at this point we didn't know if John was going to live or not. I mean, he'd been shot 11 times. David was laughing and he said to me, "Oh, my son's better than 50 Cent. He only got shot 9 times. This is the rapper 50 Cent, who apparently got shot 9 times.
The next day, apparent retaliation. A shooting in a nightclub where UN gangsters were partying.
It's happening so randomly right now that you don't feel like staying in this city anymore. So I think it's better we should move somewhere else.
3 months later, the gangsters revealed how little regard they have for who gets caught in the crossfire.
The flavor of the meeting was that they wanted a public place so nobody would, necessarily feel free to shoot each other, but that was a possibility.
At, of all places, a family amusement park, Jamie Bacon and associates met with another rival gang, apparently working on an alliance against the powerful UN. The gangsters were armed with semi-automatic weapons, and police made several on-the-spot arrests. The charges were for firearms and breaching bail conditions, but the gangsters wouldn't be in jail for long. Within a year, 3 of these men, including Jamie Bacon, would be accused in the most brutal gangland massacre in BC history, known as the Surrey Six. Gangsters were the last thing on Eileen Mahan's mind on a rainy October night in 2007, as she left her financial management job in downtown Vancouver, heading home to an apartment her family had moved into just a month earlier.
We've never been in a crime situation. We were a family who was going about with their life. We were living today but thinking about tomorrow.
In the months before the Surrey Six shooting of October of 2007, there was a lot of conflict amongst the mid-level gangs across Metro Vancouver, out to Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Surrey, right downtown. There were a lot of tit-for-tat shootings.
To most people, it still felt like the violence was happening only to those involved in the drug trade. And Eileen Mahan had no idea that her new apartment was across the hall from a known drug trafficker. When she got off at her station in Surrey, Eileen was turned away from her building. Initially, police thought there was a gas leak. The family assembled at a nearby relative's. All except for son Christopher, who was thought to be at his regular Friday night basketball game. Only he never showed up.